welcome back to episode 4 of the Maturing Together podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tammy Oliori, a counseling psychologist based here in the UK. And today we are going to be looking at how the relationship that we have with rest and self-soothing can have an impact on our ability to have a healthy relationship with ourselves. So as you journey along with me today, the question that I want you to start with in asking yourself is, what relationship do I have with resting and self-soothing? And I don't know, maybe just notice what this question provokes for you. Is it something that you're familiar with? Is it a concept that maybe you've been wondering about, that you may have been wondering, I am not someone who is very good at resting. And what even is self-soothing? That might be a new concept to you. I don't just want to talk about rest today because there's a lot more to rest than just being still or not doing as much. And when we look at I guess, emotional regulation. Yes, when we think about like regulating our emotions, the one thing that people think regulating emotion is that it's about calm. It's about finding peace, and that peace is about calm. But I want to take your thinking a little bit beyond that emotional regulation and being able to regulate and work with difficult emotion, being able to ground yourself, is not just about calming yourself. In fact, what I've been saying to people is peace as we know it, and everyone's saying, I'm looking for my peace and I just want to be peaceful. And for most people, as a psychologist, when most people come to see me, whether people don't come to see me when they're happy, which is, yeah, that's my job. Unfortunately, people come to see me when they are in distress, when they're overwhelmed. And when I ask the key question, or the sort of kind of ultimate jackpot question most therapists will ask is, what do you want to get out of therapy? And people say, I just want to be calm. I just want to be happy. And that's alluding to the fact that there's a lot of chaos going on in my life right now. I can't manage it and I need you to help me figure this out. But oftentimes, those are just, when you look at sort of what does happiness mean to you, when you look at what is sort of kind of calm mean to you, we sort of recognize that people are actually stuck, overwhelmed, and struggling with emotional regulation. Now, if we struggle to regulate our emotions, we're not going to have a good relationship with ourselves, because our emotions form a really big part of, emotions aren't who we are, but, there are signals that form the basis of how we relate to who we are. So emotions are signals and give us information about our lives, gives us information about like our environment, and gives us information about, other people. So emotions are sort of the signal that help for us to be able to have a connection with our body, our soul, our spirit, and to be able to sort of kind of not just survive in life, but to be able to sort of live in a way in which, we're guided towards our purpose, we're guided towards our aliveness, and living a fulfilled life. So you can't talk about your self-worth without sort of like thinking about how you manage and you regulate your emotions. In fact, you can't talk about dealing with, having a good mental health or a healthy mental health state without talking about regulating your emotions. And like I said, I want you to think beyond. I want you to think about rest beyond just calm. And peace is not just about being calm. Peace is not just about, peace isn't about not having discomfort. Peace is actually about our ability to be able to tolerate discomfort. Right? So the absence of discomfort does not necessarily bring peace. And the presence of discomfort does not necessarily mean we're not peaceful. Right? And I'm going to open that up for you. So I want you to think about, what does soothing mean to you? Is this something that you do? Is this something that you don't do? So I want you to think beyond the word rest and also think about it alongside self-soothing. So what is self-soothing? Now, the way that I explain soothing to humans is when you think about a child, a baby. So if you've never had a baby or you've never come across a baby, you would have seen one on TV. So in fact, let's go to the very sort of kind of beginning of how babies get here. not the sort of kind of before conception, but let's talk about sort of the birthing process, right? So I'm a mom and I have been through this myself. Not in the way that I want to go through it, but I've seen baby, I've had the experience of a baby crying. And, like even before I became a mom, I was, had lots of kids around me. So let's think about the birthing process. If you've never, don't worry if you've never had the experience of giving birth to a child, witnessing one. I'm pretty sure you've seen one on TV, one way or another. So if you think about the process, the childbirth process, I just think is stressful, most of the time, traumatic, just because it's not an easy process at all. So it's a very scary situation that can also come with happiness and can come with excitement, lots of feelings happening around it. So let's just put that to the side. Now, when the baby comes out, right, in an ideal situation, let's not think about this sort of kind of like horrible birth stories. Let's think about the ideal situation. A baby comes out. This is a child that is being sort of kind of like sheltered and shielded in sort of layers and layers of skin, predictability, and all of that type of environment, all of that type of thing. They've been used to this environment, being in the womb, and suddenly they come out through this process of being pushed out or sort of kind of like operated on and evicted. That child, one way or another. Now I've seen different things happen. Right when my sister was giving birth, my nephew did not cry. The first few seconds, he didn't cry. He was literally very surprised, actually. And, well, he looked surprised. I don't know whether that's what he felt, but he was blinking his eyes like, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? But in most cases, what we know is when babies are sort of kind of like when they're coming through the sort of kind of birth canal or they've been taken out, they cry, right? Now, when a baby is crying, that's not happiness, right? We can all allude to that if someone is crying, they're not well, we can cry happy tears, but in this case, like it's like what is happening? This is like an unfamiliar situation, different sensory stimuli, people touching me. Even my nephew who came out very curious, highly curious, eventually like they made him cry. They made him cry because they needed to sort of kind of like, poke and prod and check that like he can cry. And so they disturbed him. So there's a disturbance. The process is very disturbing, not only for the child, but for the sort of birthing parents as well. So this disturbance, we think about it again, like like I spoke about in the previous episode, like you think about your nervous system. When we're disturbed, our nervous system is in a particular state of well, you can say survival mode, either sort of kind of like the sympathetic state where like, we're freaked out, or it's shut down in, sort of kind of like the vagal mode. So in this case, like where most baby cry, ha 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 ha. That's sort of kind of the sympathetic state. Baby's probably scared, what's going on, being touched, and like all the medics, they want to know that this baby can function properly, can cry, he's got a voice, they do the hearing test, all of that type of stuff is going on. The mother is trying to recuperate, or like the birthing parent is trying to recuperate. Excitement, pain, all of that's going on. Now, what happens in an ideal situation is once the check's been done, probably take a few minutes, they give the baby back to the parent. And what happens is they want the parent to put the baby, so they do the skin to skin contact. They sort of kind of place the baby on the chest. And that's an act of soothing, right? So they place the baby on sort of kind of like the parent's chest, is whichever parent is able to sort of take the baby at that time. There's a lot that goes on in that process at that time. Once that baby feels comfort, not just their mind, but their body, and a lot of hormonal interaction helps to calm the baby, right? Helps to calm the baby. And that's the process of soothing. Now you think about sort of kind of distress soothing. So when we are in distress, what helps us calm down is soothing. And it's not a simple thing. It's something that you need to think about on a neurobiological basis. What's happening in our body when we feel soothed? What's happening, within our nervous system? How's the brain working? What's happening hormonally? Like, what hormones being activated when we're being soothed? There's a lot going on. So not only does the baby feel soothed, parents have also reported feeling calm Now that sort of kind of like sense touch, that just regulates a lot of things. There's so much happening hormone wise. If you think about it, when we're overwhelmed, the dominant hormone that we experience when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed, is cortisol, adrenaline, all of these hormones, and they're important for us in order to be able to deal with the situation. Adrenaline sort of kind of like spikes us up, so to get into sort of kind of that fight or flight mode, to be able to sort of like mobilize and do whatever we need to do to be safe. The hormone that is responsible to be able to calm, soothe, be grounded, and feel safe is different. Our body is able to generate this, and that's sort of oxytocin is one of the hormones that's, like when our body generates oxytocin, it brings a sense of groundedness, a sense of calm, connection, right? So this is why I want you to think about the relationship that you have with rest and soothing, right? Because we've described like an ideal situation of being in distress and having someone there to regulate, to co-regulate with you as a baby. That's what we depend on. That we depend on sort of kind of having someone there to help us regulate, to give us comfort, even without words, without our ability to understand. Our body can get that. Now, if we start to think about, if you fall into the category of people who say, I don't know what soothing is, I don't know what rest is, or when I try to rest, I can't. I want you to think about it in this way. What story has your body learned or developed around soothing and resting? Because I want you to think about your body. There's no separation between your body and your mind, right? The nervous system, which controls everything in our body, runs from the head all the way through to our body. Sometimes we separate it. We talk about the brain and the body, and it's just to make sense of things in a very quick way. But a lot of things happen within our body, not up here. And so our earlier experiences around rest, around soothing, have an impact on how we engage in these experiences in our later life. And in fact, when we can't soothe, when we can't rest, that can have an impact on our ability to be able to connect with ourselves, to connect with our body. And I'm going to explain why that is. Again, scientifically, if you think about your brain and body, or like let's just say in this case, the brain as a departmental store, and I've explained the nervous system, but if you think about your brain as a departmental store, so say it's a Debenhams and it has different departments, your brain is responsible for doing so many things. As I'm talking now, there's a part of my brain that is allowing me to do that. Walking, moving, there's a part of your brain that's allowing you to do that. All your sensory channel, there's a part of your brain helping you to do that. Emotions, regulating your emotions, there's a part of brain that is helping you to do that, right? And if at any point one part of your brain isn't working, so if the part that is responsible for language isn't working, I might not be able to sort of kind of like formulate speech. If the part of the brain that is responsible for thinking isn't working, I might not be able to think coherently, and that can affect my day-to-day functioning. Now, if you think about sort of kind of like your day-to-day functioning as a person, and I want you to think about sort of kind of like three things. So the part of your brain that's keeping you safe, right? That's the part that we call the amygdala, right? That's, one of the sort of kind of like dominant aspect of the brain that helps to facilitate safety, that's constantly on the lookout for danger subconsciously in a lot of ways, because you're not sort of kind of thinking about danger. But if you're just going about your day, you're walking on the street, that amygdala is sort of kind of looking out for danger. If this car suddenly stops, your amygdala is going to take charge without thoughts, right? So safety doesn't begin with thoughts like, oh my God, what's happening here? What do I need to do? It just moves into action, right? So that's that part of the brain, and it will protect you. Do everything to protect you. You don't need a map. You don't need to sort of, overthink these things. It will just naturally happen, right? So your amygdala is always working to keep you safe and alive. And, it does that by, activating things like anxiety, anger, disgust. A lot of emotions show up when our amygdala is active, right? And it's not supposed to be there all the time, because if it is active all the time, that's when problem comes. And for a lot of people, this part of the brain is active all of the time, especially if we have grown up in an environment where we've grown up with chaos. We've just not known safety. That part of our brain is active all of the time. We just find that we're hypervigilant, right? That actually, if my body slows down, if it stops, if I'm not doing something, I'm going to be unsafe. And bad things have happened when that has happened before. Sometimes these are the stories that our body already has wired, has sort of stored. And so that can have an impact on our ability to self-soothe or rest, or we don't even know what that is at all, because we've never been taught. We've never had the experience of it. And so that makes it really, really, really difficult. So you think about it, my body is constantly on high alert all the time. It makes it really difficult for me to stop, for me to slow down. And what does that mean for my mental health? What does that mean for my ability to be able to be inside my body, to be able to connect with myself? How does that affect the type of life that I'm living? These are the questions that I want you to start thinking about. So it's not just about rest alone. It's also about thinking beyond rest. Like, how do I soothe? So the part of the brain that is responsible for your productivity, for getting things done, that's another part of your brain. And it can work in alliance with the part of the brain that is also keeping you alive. Because obviously you think about, like, being productive, getting things done, whether it's exams, whether it's sort of kind of going to work and, showing up, paying your bills. There's a lot going on. Oftentimes it's about your survival as well, because if you don't pay your bills, you'll be homeless. If you don't have a job, you'll be homeless. If you don't have a job, you won't have money to pay your bills. And so, constantly these two parts of your brain that is sort of kind of working to be productive, to make sure that you're well and alive, they're super active, especially if, as an adult they are super active. Even as a child they are super active, because children have responsibilities too, to a degree. So from being a child, your amygdala didn't need to sort of kind of get woken up. From being born, you're sort of kind of like surveilling the environment. When you're hungry, you sort of cry for food. If you get food, good. You know that, like, people can help me. If you don't get food, your body, your mind is telling a story of no one is here for me. So our early experiences, when we have needs, when we communicate our needs, when we don't have words to communicate our needs, we cry for it. We use our behaviors for it. And the response that we get wired into our mind, our body, our nervous system. It sort of kind of start to build a story. The world is safe or the world is unsafe. It's not so complex. It's either the world is safe or the world is unsafe. People care about me or people don't care about me. They're very, very simple, sort of kind of grasp in those early sort of parts of our life. Very simple sort of kind of narrative that gets wired. Other people are dependable, other people aren't dependable. We don't come with the ability to comprehensively self-soothe. The soothing that we get from the people around us, the people that we depend on, has an impact on our ability to be able to naturally soothe. If the people that are looking after us, that we depend on, can't soothe themselves comprehensively, because, as a baby, soothing is food, soothing is sort of like, having attention. Soothing is, having our needs met on time. When all of those things aren't there, before you even have thinking, your body is mapping it out that I can depend on other people. Shame as a response, when I talked about sort of shame briefly, when I was talking about self-criticism, is something that we can experience from age about 9 months old, before we even have words. And that is dependent on the experiences of our needs being met, our needs for safety, our needs for being seen, our needs for being safe, our needs for being secure. Whenever we have the experience of not being able to have our needs met, whether we're shut down, whether we're humiliated, whether we don't, like the people who we need, our attachment figure, when they aren't able to be there for us, when they shut us down, when they neglect or they abandon us, we might not have the words, but our body carries that. we can feel that sense of freeze, shame, and that gets stored in our body and it doesn't go anywhere. Right? Even if we don't have the words for it, it doesn't go anywhere and it manifests in different ways. We know now, in terms of research, that it can manifest physically, it can manifest psychologically in terms of the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because the message that shame carries is, I'm bad. When we're young, when we're little, and our needs don't get met, and we experience abandonment, neglect, abuse, we don't have the capacity to say this abuse is caused by my external environment. All we do, because of the nature of the way in which a child's brain works, is it's all about me. Something must be wrong with me to make this happen to me. And in a lot of ways, it gives us a sense of control to blame ourselves for what's happening than to blame our caregivers, because we still need to attach to those. If our caregivers are careless and neglectful to, and sort of kind of like the grade of being bad people, we still need that attachment. Despite the fact that it's unhealthy, we still need that. So it's safer to see myself as the bad person than to see them as the bad person, because that could lead to death. If I start to see them as bad people, not great people, neglectful people, where am I going to go? Right? And so that's why it's very common when we have adverse experiences by the people who are supposed to look after us. It's very common for us to internalize the blame of what's happened to us. Right? And so when our bodies sort of like encompass all of these stories, so here I don't want to sort of kind of like divert, but if you think about it, if I've not been soothed because I can't do it as a child, I'm not going to know how to do that as an adult. If I don't know, if sort of kind of resting and stopping, and the messages that I got growing up is you always have to work hard, always. If it didn't feel safe, if my caregivers were sort of kind of like, and a lot of people will talk about never having, and for females in particular, never having seen a female who rested in their lineage, because women were just on the go. We know this, in terms of sort of kind of like cultural practices, cultural experiences, the burdens that, women tend to carry. Never seen sort of kind of like a woman sit down after work to rest. Never seen a woman sort of say like, oh, like, let me just sort of kind of relax to this music. That's the experience that you've grown up with. That's what your body knows. It's going to make it really, really difficult. So if your body constantly is looking out for danger to sort of kind of protect you, is sort of kind of working so hard to make sure that, you have resources. Sometimes it's also sort of kind of like, chasing happiness and excitement. And that's a different part of the brain. The part of the brain that is responsible for excitement and happiness is different to the part of the brain that rests, that soothes, that sort of decompresses. The part of the brain, when you think about it, what's happening in my body when I'm excited, when I'm happy, that's dopamine. Dopamine, right? And for a lot of people, that's sort of kind of like what we've grown up with. So, parents having good intention don't even want their children to have emotions. So when we think about emotional regulation, we could have grown up with messages, don't cry. Like you tell your parent, like, I'm scared. What are you scared for? You shouldn't be scared. You need to be happy. Look at what I'm giving you. So this message of sort of like expecting that like well-being equal happiness could have been something that we've learned, or maybe, distress is just not something that we've been that, like when I explained it before, when that baby's crying in the sort of kind of birth room, no one is saying like jumping straight away to sort of say, let's give it food. That's a different thing. It's sort of kind of regulation. That's soothing. Soothing is different to food can be soothing too, because, like we grow up sort of kind of like, if you're crying, take a lollipop, do this, do that. But there's a limitation, right? Soothing is more than just that. Soothing is the ability to be able to hold distress, to be able to sort of just create space for it. And a lot of us don't know how to do it. We know how to be happy. We know how to sort of kind of numb distress. We know how to shut it down. We don't know what to do with holding it or self-soothing, because we've not had the experiences. We've not had the support. We've not had we've just not had sort of like that experience, whether sort of like, from other people. Our body's just never been able to, um it doesn't have a memory map for it. And maybe we've also had experiences where if we did that, it meant danger. And so inability to sort of rest and self-soothe has a consequence, because the way in which your brain would constantly be oriented, your brain is definitely going to look out for danger, that you're born with it. You're human, like every animal, like in the jungle, does that. Um, but what animals are very good at, lions in the jungle, they sleep a lot, right? They prioritize their rests, even when they sort of kind of like come in contact with danger. They've either they've chased the danger away, they've chased the predator away, or they've been chased. What happens naturally is their body goes into rest and digest mode, and they're able to do that. For a lot of human beings, we're running constantly on the clock of trying to sort of kind of like survive, working so hard. And, we know about the demands of our modern life that requires us to work a lot in order to be able to sort of like, have our necessary physical needs met, to the point where we don't know how to rest. We don't know how to self-soothe. We have a lot of emotional experiences, whether that be from the past, whether that be from the present. We all know that, like, our society currently is very, very suffering inducing. Whether we go out looking for the suffering, we're watching it on TV, or we know somebody or who is sort of kind of like suffering, or, we're dealing with grief, changes, transition, loss of job, this or that. Stress finds its way into our life one way or another. No one is shielded from it, right? No matter what privileges you have or what privileges you don't have, one way or another, stress, overwhelm, or even past trauma has its way, will find you. And what do you do with it? You can make yourself happy out of it. We know that from that. People want to be happy all the time, and they want to use happiness to solve the problem. Oftentimes, this leads to addiction, chasing the high, because, the high is dopamine, right? Like, want to just get high can lead to addiction. I want to just numb it off can lead to addiction. I want to just forget about it. Workaholism, using work, using all sorts of ways to escape our problem, because we don't know how to rest. We don't know how to self-soothe. And the more we do that, the further away we are in disconnection with ourselves. And the part of the brain that helps us sort of rest, that helps us self-soothe, is very different from the part of the brain that is helping us look out for danger, helping us with productivity. And that part just doesn't get really as much stimulation. Again, if you're finding yourself in this conversation and you're thinking, wow, I don't know how to self-soothe. I know how to work hard. I know I'm hypervigilant all the time, or I'm numb all the time, or most of the time I'm numb and hypervigilant. I don't know what to do with these things. I can't rest. Or when I try to rest, my body tells the story that it's not safe. When I try to self-soothe, I don't even know what that is. I wouldn't even know where to start. If you're finding yourself in this narrative, nothing is wrong with you, right? There's a reason, right? You're not broken. You're not flawed for not being able to do these things. If you find that you're constantly on the go all the time, and you think about the impact, burnout. I'm constantly in and out of depression and anxiety, in and out of depression and anxiety, just because I can't regulate my emotion, because I can't self-soothe, is having an impact on my relationship. I'm very poor at communicating when, like, something heated happens, maybe in my romantic relationship or my friend, platonic relationship. I just shut down. I just avoid difficulties because I don't want to face it. I just shut down because I don't know what to do, right? I don't know how to meet these inner experiences. So I shut down. It had an impact on the relationships that I have. I can't even find myself. Or, my default is sort of kind of like them being critical. Just life isn't going the way that I want it to go. I am not, I am further away from being able to be there for myself, from being able to ground myself, you're not broken. You're not flawed in any way. You've just had experiences or a lack of it to be able to sort of kind of like help you be fully functioning. And let me say, fully functioning does not mean you don't have any distress at all. It just means that you're able to create space for it, because we need to be able to self-soothe. We need to be able to rest. It's impossible for us to sort of kind of just run on high energy, high alert, even if we're happy. Happiness is draining. I know that. I know that from experience. I always say this to my client. Life is not about being happy all the time, right? You know, when you're overwhelmed, do not focus on happiness. Just focus on safety. It's within our ability to self-soothe, our ability to rest, that we find safety, we find connection, we find creativity. We're able to think more flexibly, more logically, more rationally, more in alignment with who we are meant to be. Whatever version throughout our lifetime that is, it's when we're able to access this part of us, where we're able to sort of regulate, self-soothe, calm, when we're able to listen to our body, be in connection with ourselves, that we are able to be on that path where we're connected with ourselves, where our relationships can thrive, where our where we can sort of kind of live in alignment with our purpose, where we can hold, where we can hold space for distress, where we can hold space for discomfort, not avoid it, not numb away from it, not just be happy, not pretending, but being sort of kind of like in our wholeness as we are meant to be. All right. So if you find yourself in this narrative that I can't do this, just know that even if you can't do it now, it's a skill. You need to find, you can learn it. You can learn how to self-soothe. First, you need to understand what's been my experience of soothing. When I was a child, what soothed me? Who was there for me? If you haven't had experiences of that being done, then it's not too late. Usually I find that because we're humans, we're like creatures of connection. We can self-soothe on our own, but oftentimes we need someone to teach us. We need someone to co-regulate with us, to do it with us, in order for us to be able to establish it on our own and be able to do it on our own, because that's the way it works. You think about that babies they have limited capacity. Yes, they can like do that with their lips, like suck their lips, suck their tongue. But there's a limited repertoire of self-soothing behaviors that we have as kids, as babies, as toddlers, as little children. And co-regulation is how we learn it, how we embody it, how we're able to sort of kind of like then be able to sort of do it, even in adult life. We still need other people. We still need community. We still need, friendship. We still need relationship to be able to sort of like, self-soothe. Like, I'm a therapist who goes to therapy. Therapy is one of the ways in which I'm able to sort of kind of like find that space. And also, I wouldn't be, my life just would not be complete or whole or healthy without my relationships, friendships. I don't joke with sort of kind of friendships. I'm also very lucky to have like siblings who I have healthy relationship with. And there are different things that we take from different people. We need to know that. But if we struggle to sort of kind of self-soothe and it's been a long-standing issue, well, we might find that we don't have those sort of kind of secure relationships, and we need to build that. But most importantly, it starts with us. If you are sort of kind of finding yourself in this narrative, you can learn. You can even learn on your own first. If you don't have that community of people, nothing is lost. But I won't deny it. I know from experience, from research, that we can achieve that much more effectively with other people being around. So I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you carried that question along. What relationship do I have with rest? What relationship do I have with soothing? And you can start to unpack and unpick, you know, these parts of your life that might be blocking you from connecting with yourself and from having a healthy relationship with other people, because what we're here for is to learn, is to heal, and to be able to grow, especially in alignment with who we are meant to be, with our purpose, and to be able to live a life that gives us fulfillment. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next.